Thank you very much for coming in. Hi, Mark. If the panel can turn on your camera, that'd be good. And I'll do a shorter introduction than I would like to, but because of time, I think I'll just go for there. But the bios are in the Slack as well. So the Stats Society has several sections, so they are linked to some topics, and we have some of the stellar representatives here today for some of those sections. So I would encourage you to look at the sections that the Stats Society has available for you. So we have Associate Professor Sue Finch from the Stats Consulting Network, very experienced professor in consulting and teaching innovative statistical techniques. And we also have Dr. Mark Griffin from, he's a co-chair of the section from Business Analytics, and he's also working in academia and also now has his own business in stats consulting and training. And he's going through his 7th degree coming up soon. Very exciting too. And we have River Paul co-chairing with him the business analytics section too, and very working in government with some award for the impact of her work. So check out the bios for more details. We also have Dr. Kellyanne Mallet from lecturer in biostatistics at the University of Sydney in public health, with also many years of experience working in statistics and also with some prizes there. And we also have Soraya McPhail joining us from the AVS, our sponsor, and with great experience with some exciting projects as well that she has worked on. So I really encourage you to check out the details in their bios. So I will bring some questions first for the panel, and then I will ask you to pop in some questions in the Slack channel. So I'll start to ask the members of the panel, how did they end up working in this area that they are in, or in the sector that they are in statistics? So whoever wants to kick in.
Oh, I'm happy to start it off then. I'll talk about working in government. So about 20 years ago, I was actually in the private sector in retail and doing modelling to help you part with your money, help make sure we turned our inventory fast and make my boss a lot of money. And I started to think that seemed like it might have a finite life, and that I might like to think a bit harder about how to make an impact and make sure that I could look back and feel like I'd made a difference. And so it occurred to me that the public sector is a way for me to do that, because like it or not, we're in your lives every single day, whether you're driving on a road, going to university, lodging that wonderful tax return that we've all just lodged, we're here. And so, yeah, I haven't looked back from that after 20 odd years trying to make a difference.
Thank you, Riva.
Excellent. So if everybody else on the panel is shy, I'll go next. So again, as sort of Daniela, as Connie has said, so I work in business analytics. But while business analytics, the name implies that I work in the commercial sector, I say that I work in business analytics, but within the government and NGO sector. But how did I get there? Let me go all the way to the beginning, but let me go through this really quickly. So I started out combined Bachelor of Computer Engineering, Bachelor of Science, probably I mean, naturally gifted in mathematics, so really excelled in mathematics subjects, really struggled with everything that wasn't maths. Did my PhD in an area joint between mathematics, computer science, and chemistry. After that, worked in medical image analysis for about 10 years, both here in Australia, so my hometown of, home city of Brisbane, but also 3 years in Canada, 6 months in Switzerland, working in medical image analysis using maths and computer science techniques to pull interesting features out of medical images. Did a little bit of dabbling in clinical trials during that time. Then sort of moved into working as a statistician in clinical trials. Found myself working with the School of Public Health at the University of Queensland, seeing sort of for the first time both clinical trials and also epidemiology, particularly the role of monitoring evaluation. So monitoring evaluation, particularly every government and NGO project, and we can probably give you a big nod at this time. And on every government project, there's not just the sentiment of great, we'll just invest money. People want to know, well, where they invest their money and are they getting the bang for the buck? So always that question about, are we achieving the aims? Could we achieve the same aim while spending less money? So it's cost effective what we're doing. So a whole lot of questions being asked there. Questions which are asked dabbling in both the qualitative and the quantitative research domain. After a couple of years at School of Public Health, started my own company in 2011. So I believe I'm either the most or one of the most active presenters of short courses in statistics in Australia. So I've now presented something like 100 two-day workshops and 45-day workshops to academics all across Australia. A little bit of overseas work. If you were to sort of pick, I don't know, what was the country that Mark's, which I think Mark would have gone over to teach stats in? Probably the last, your last pick, North Korea. Went over to North Korea once to teach stats. So interesting experience. But again, these days I say they're working in business analytics, but mostly within the government and NGO space. That's me. And I'm going to put into the chat box those people who are interested. I'm going to put into the chat box my LinkedIn, and I'm also going to put in the LinkedIn details for this section for business analytics for the people who are interested in that sort of space or who want to connect with me. Please reach out. But that's me.
I'll perhaps go next. Being the third least shy, obviously. Thanks, Daniela. Just for everyone, I'm a statistical consultant in the Consulting Centre at University of Melbourne, and I'm also co-chair of the Statistical Consulting Network, which for anyone who is feeling like a sole statistician or even a slightly isolated statistician, we encourage you to come along to our monthly meetups where you can meet other people working in stats and ask questions if you're not sure how to deal with a particular problem or person. So how did I get to being a statistical consultant? Working with academics, but also working with external clients. Well, my sort of passion for stats really came through working my undergraduate work in psychology and statistics, where I really was interested in broadly the range of methodologies that were used and the range of disciplines that statistics was used in. But I also had an interest in really thinking about how people understood statistical ideas and how they struggled with them. So a strong component of my consulting and my other work is also educational. But I did a good thing, I think, when I graduated, and I went and worked in statistical services at the ABS, which was a fantastic, rigorous training ground. And I'm very happy I did that. And then I worked in a number of different research organisations before I went back into academia and worked in statistical education research and then moved into consulting. I'll hand over to Kylie next. So I'll be bold and say who's next.
Thank you, Sue. So like a lot of other people, I think I sort of fell into statistics. I didn't start out as a kid going, I want to be a statistician when I grow up. Opportunities kind of presented themselves along the way. So I started with just a degree in biology, and I certainly enjoyed the statistical component of that, but I decided I was going to become a geneticist, and I went and started a PhD in genetics, and I spent many months pipetting and was bored out of my brain. And upstairs, they advertised for a position for a research assistant in biostatistics. And I said, yep, that will do. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. And they sponsored me to do my master's in biostatistics, which was fantastic. And I think the speaker prior to this session, Kylie Lang, was talking a little bit about the pressure to do a PhD once you get into academia. And I felt that, but it was also something I wanted to do. I wanted to contribute to research, which is why I initially begun a PhD in genetics, which I didn't complete. And so then I went and did a PhD in medical statistics and really enjoyed that, whilst at the same time working as an officer
research officer in statistics, and I just got really bitten by the research bug. So I did a NHMRC fellowship, and then now I am a senior lecturer in biostatistics at the University of Sydney. And it's just, yeah, it wasn't a planned trajectory. It was really just, yeah, taking advantages of opportunities and following my passion as it came. I really enjoy particularly working as a statistician in medical research and public health. It's just really great getting to work with a lot of clinicians who are really, really passionate about their work. And so that kind of inspired me to follow this path. Who else is on the panel? Sarah?
Cool. Yeah, so my name's Saraya and I currently work at the ABS, which is the official statistics organisation for Australia. So I've been there for just around 2 years now. But yeah, how I started in statistics, I guess a little similar to River. I did some internships in the private sector and kind of realised that I was really passionate about making a difference and my work being able to impact others in a positive way. And I guess in terms of statistics, I studied math, stats and economics at UWA. And I kind of wanted something that incorporated a bit of everything out of my degree. So I was really interested in being able to use the problem solving and analytical skills from math and stats, but also be able to relate that to economics and real world applications of that. So I started at the ABS as a graduate. I had a really good experience and yeah, I've kind of followed through working there.
Are you talking, Daniela? You're on mute.
We can't hear you, Daniela.
Danielle, you're still on mute, man.
I think Daniela's asking someone to unmute her.
Daniela, I don't think we have the power to do that.
No, I think Xi Jing will need to do that.
I am trying as a co-host, but when I ask to unmute it's not doing anything for Danielle.
Yeah, I can only ask her to unmute. I can't make her unmute.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know. Auslan, sorry.
I think you can just log out and log in again. It's maybe so the problem.
So if it's okay, what I might suggest, while we were resolving that, I know that that Daniela had 3 questions for us as the panelists. So maybe we'll actually just move into the second question, and hopefully while we're answering the second question, then we'll sort of, hopefully she'll find out her way to get unmuted. So while I've got the microphone, I might actually pass the buck and actually ask everybody else to answer the question first, and then I'll answer it afterwards. But so the second question, so for everybody, the second question that we've been asked as panelists, what are the most exciting, challenging things about working in this area or sector? And I'm going to pass the buck to Sue.
Oh, thanks, Mark. Well, I'm going to be brief because there's so many exciting and challenging things. I think it's a fantastic career to work as a consultant. For me, what's most exciting is just the opportunity to work across a really broad range of disciplines. So I always learn heaps of interesting stuff about many different kinds of research applications and get to meet lots of really smart, interesting people. So that's a very satisfying thing. Some of the work I do is related to legal cases, and some of you might know Professor Ian Gordon, who's the director of the Statistical Consulting Centre. He often takes the lead on these projects. And these are really the most challenging kind of jobs to work on, and in some ways the most interesting. because often the kind of work you need to do is not sort of straightforward, but it requires really deep and fundamental interrogation of statistical principles, and then try to explain them in very precise and exact ways. And so that's a challenge to fundamental understanding of our discipline, and I find that, you know, that is interesting and exciting. And often those projects or those jobs have important social implications, those legal cases. So I'll pass over to Soraya this time and see what she's got to say.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, so lots of different projects that we work on at the ABS, which is really exciting because, yeah, you never really get bored. There's constant movement and different, I guess, areas you can go into. And at the moment, there is a lot of, I guess, innovation, trying to revamp the way we do things. So at the moment, we've got a lot of focus on using admin data complementary to surveys. So that's a lot of exciting work, trying to see like proof of concept work to see if this is actually feasible. We also have the opportunity to rotate. So there are so many different areas within our division, which math, stats and data scientists can work on. So we've got things from survey design to machine learning, confidentiality of data. There's just a real wide range of projects and, I guess, room for growth. I guess the flip side to that is that, yeah, it can sometimes be challenging, I guess, upskilling yourself. I know a lot of projects I've worked on I necessarily haven't come across before. But yeah, there's a great support within the ABS and a good emphasis on training up young statisticians and making sure they have the skills, I guess, to develop their career, which is great. Kylie-Ann, would you like to go?
Sure. One of the most exciting things for me is echoing what others have said of the variety of what I do, not just in terms of the projects that I work on, but just in terms of day-to-day activities in a given week, the amount of different things that I do between, you know, teaching and research and supervision of students, and, you know, no 2 days are the same, and that's really great. There's also a lot of flexibility in managing my time within the university system. So outside of, you know, core meetings and core teaching commitments, there really is just incredible flexibility, which works really well for, I have a young family, and so that's really, really helpful. One of the challenges, not so much now, but when I was more of a junior statistician, I think when you do your degree and you learn your core set of statistical skills, but then you go out and you practice as a statistician. I did a lot of work as a statistical consultant for many years, and you learn that so much of practical statistics occurs outside of the set of what you're taught, and it can take a long time to feel like you really know what you're doing in a way, that you have confidence in yourself to advise other people. And even to this day, I mean, obviously we're always still learning, and we always will. There's always going to be the next technique that we don't know that we learn, and that's fantastic. But I think it can take some time to find your feet as a statistician, but it's been a really, really rewarding journey. River?
Thanks. So like many people, I had lots of ideas when I joined the public sector about how to improve it. I think as people who are on the other side of the public sector, we all have ideas, and sometimes it's good to try and transform within. And so, similar to everybody else who's talked, you know, the federal public sector is one of Australia's largest employers. So we include the ABS in our fold, but there are around 23,000 of us across the country. And so that means that you will get to choose which department you want to work in, what research questions interest you, and really carve out a pretty fantastic career. The challenges and opportunities are actually two sides of the same coin in the public sector. So as I say, I came with lots of ideas and was excited to contribute to some of the things that would serve the community well. So in the public sector, we are apolitical, and so our cycles are quite different to government cycles, which tend to revolve around elections. Whereas our job is to look forward 10, 20, 50 years ahead and think about what we might need to do now to prepare the community for the future. And so the flip side of that is because you're looking at such long timeframes, it can take time for your work to actually be rolled out and see the impact. And so 2 examples that have cropped up and are now front of everybody's mind, but at the time were sort of seen as fun little research projects. One was I led the world's first Fisher Price Index, which is a very niche area of statistics. But this year in the inflationary environment, people are talking more and more about the Consumer Price Index. The Fisher Price Index was looking at retail margins and supply chains. So what we were trying to do was identify 2 things. One, where the supply chain was actually falling over, for example, like we're seeing now with weather affecting the ability to plant and harvest crops, but also to have a look at where the supply chain was actually being affected by certain suppliers using their market power. So if you're a bigger supplier, using your market power to basically rot the system and screw the smaller suppliers. And I now work in the small business space, so have continued that theme. And so obviously when we did that, it was probably about 10 years ago, and everybody thought, well, that was really interesting. Thanks very much. And it's good to know the Fisher Price Index works. Now, of course, that actually informs things. The second thing that we looked at was actually the reason that I met Mark and became co-chair of the Business Analytics Group. So back in 2016, I was working at the bankruptcy office, and we were thinking about how odd it was that the incidence rate of bankruptcies was rising during one of Australia's major economic boom. So we were looking at why that might be, and also looking at stress testing so that we could figure out how we could make sure that we would have the right staff available in order to, if we had a surge, but also if we needed to cut staff if we didn't, because of course we work for you and we want to make sure that we use those resources well. So back in 2016, we'd sort of said, look, if the unemployment rate increased by 1 percentage point, we think this is what would happen and when it would happen, so that we would have some planning in place. So we'd done all of that and thought that was really interesting, and again, put that in the cupboard and then pulled it out really fast in March 2020. And so that's sort of the challenge and the opportunity. The other challenge for us is definitely finding people to help us, because sometimes we have questions where they probably won't take very long. We probably don't need a full-time staff member, but we do need someone with a fresh pair of eyes to tell us how to help. And so an example of that is at the moment I'm working with the Standard Payment Times regulator. So that's a new regulation that was set up a year or 2 ago to have a look at how quickly large businesses are paying small businesses. So as we all know, during the COVID pandemic period, it's been a really tough economic time for a lot of businesses, and small businesses are particularly concentrated in the areas that were severely affected by lockdowns. So cash flow is very important for them, and they also tend to have less access to finance. And when they do have finance, it's often secured by the family home. So cash flow is king for these businesses. So the regulator was set up to collect this data and make sure that businesses are paying in a timely manner. The problem in government is that we don't actually have enough people to analyse this data and think of creative ways to use it and help the regulator put those messages back out to the community. And so that's always a challenge for us. And so one of the ways that we're looking to fill that gap is by running things like data challenges, and you'll see them pop up around the place, and there is one coming up for this particular topic if anyone's interested. But yeah, that's an ongoing challenge. But one of the nice things from those sorts of data challenges as well, that if you see them pop up, I really encourage you to have a crack, is that you tend to form a relationship with the government department involved, and you get experience in thinking through what might be a practical solution to some of these really hard questions about how do we make sure small businesses get paid in a timely manner. So I will hand over to you, Mark.
Perfect. Thank you, Evan. And so again, the thing about this question about what are the exciting things about working in this area and sector, I must confess there was one answer which I'll come back to, thinking about this in isolation by myself. Hearing the panel, I wanted to say there's a second answer which has come up for me, and that's that that as some of you might have been able to identify, I'm the only male on this panel. I'm excited that actually females are having, and not just females, but actually really amazing females with advanced physical skills I'm amazed by that growth of that demographic in this industry, and I'd love to sort of see this on it. I hope that this is representative of things moving forward. It's fantastic sort of speaking with the rest of the panel. That being sort of said, the other thing which sort of I'm excited and sort of passionate about, as I said, I'm sort of working in business analytics, but particularly within the government NGO space. And even though it's a small part of what I do, the thing which really sort of excites me is working in the international development sector. So, for example, I mean, and this theming has come up on it for a number of speakers already, both in this panel and previously. This whole idea that, for myself, for example, really my natural gifts are in mathematics, but I want to make a difference in the world, and I can't see a thing of a better way of doing this than this field of stats. So, one of the surveys, for example, which I was involved in, was a few years ago, was working with World Vision, did a survey of 12,000 people in the Mekong region, which is Cambodia, China, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam, on the topic of human trafficking. And again, working in something of that level of importance on that international stage, but also what can I contribute when it comes to the maths and stats skills. I'm extremely honoured and privileged to be working in that sort of sector. About a year after that, was working in a similar survey, 100,000 people, this time in Sri Lanka, on the topic of human trafficking. Yeah, so that's a thing which excites me. This whole idea that being able to use my natural gifts, and for many of us, our natural gifts, in ways that are actually of not just this is an interesting theoretical exercise. This is actually something which is going to make a real difference to the world around us. So that's the panel. Can I just see if Daniela's online? Otherwise, I'll read out a third question.
I'm back.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela.
Thank you so much, Mark, for being the chair for me, saving the day. Yeah, so I've missed some of the responses, but that's all right. So I'll move on to if everyone have already answered, so I'll move to the third question, which is, what skills should a student or early career statistician pursue if they want to enter this career path that you're in?
I'll have a go. So I spent quite a bit of time thinking about this question. I think the things that really stand out for me are communication skills, that what you do, which is highly technical, really needs to be communicated effectively to whoever's going to be the end user of your product, or whoever's going to be reading what you're doing. When you're working in collaborative teams, being able to explain what you're doing in plain language that they understand, and investing some time in understanding their priorities and their jargon can really help improve the utility and the outcomes of the research. Not a specific skill, but coming back to that question of, do I do a PhD, do I do a master's? I think above and beyond what you actually do, just any practical work experience that you can get in that field is going to accelerate you way beyond just having the degree. Using some sort of the skills that you have, actually applying those skills in a specific project, and hopefully generating some sort of output as a result of applying those skills is what's going to give you a leg up in terms of employability. Yeah, I'll stop there.
So for me, sort of following on from Kylie-Ann, so I'd sort of say on exactly the same point, exactly the same point of communication. So for me, again, working in business analytics. So business analytics is always an interesting field to work in. How do you, with all of a data scientist, I won't get into the argument of the data scientists versus statisticians in this audience, but this whole world of data scientists, how do we, on the one side, communicate with the people around us in the business context, on the one hand, the statisticians with the mathematical models on the other hand, being able to have that knowledge of the knowledge of the mathematics. When I sort of say that, these days more and more, while we have this whole idea of big data, more and more there's this argument about how do we get business value from data. So not just how do we apply interesting mathematical models to data, how do we get business value from data? The whole idea of can we learn something from the data? which is going to make a company or an organisation make better decisions in the future. That requires a huge role for a number of different stakeholders, a huge, massive, multi-interdisciplinary field. The business analysts on one side, the wider business community, every person within an organisation be able to ask questions of data, and on the other hand, the statisticians. How do you make sure that not only do you understand the mathematics involved, how do we communicate this? One of my personal bugbears, and the way that I've always seen a stats degree, is, for example, that I've never seen a stats degree which has a communication skill within it. Hopefully some of you actually are experiencing stats degrees with communication subjects. I don't know why statisticians aren't taught communication, because in my experience as a consultant, if I have problems, generally it doesn't come from the mathematical models, generally it comes from communication with the client or communication with stakeholders. I think that anything which you can do to build your communication is absolutely vital. Secondly, if you look at a data scientist role, it's been estimated that 80% of a data scientist job is spent simply preparing data for analysis, and only about 20%, if we're lucky, is actually spent doing data analysis. Maybe of that, only about 4 or 5% is actually the really interesting stats. I don't know why in stats degrees we don't get taught data preparation, since we're going to spend probably 80% of our time preparing data for analysis. So I think that anything which you can do in that space is really important. The other thing which has been a real eye-opener for me, which I spoke about with River last week, is that the stats, the software used in industry is actually different to the software used in academia, which really surprised me. In academia, as you've mostly experienced, we use SPSS almost entirely. So most academics, again, I'm looking at academics as opposed to statisticians in academia. Most academics use SPSS for the analysis. More advanced people might use a package like SPSS, like Stata. Some of us, and you would have heard presentation example today, a few people dabbling in Power BI and Python. When I say dabbling, you might be excelling in Power BI and Python in academia, but you might be the one person at your university who's really excelling in Power BI and Python. And I was really surprised. We did a few webinars a couple of weeks ago, and I know with people around the world, I was surprised that nobody put up their hand. I mean, I was speaking to people in industry and government, nobody put up their hand to say they're using SPSS as data. And most people putting up their hand to say Power BI, a few people using R and Python. And again, I was looking at business professionals in that audience as opposed to data scientists in industry. But that recognition of it's great for us to develop these skills. What sector we're going to be working in, what software are people using in that sector, can make sure not just we understand the mathematics, we actually can understand the software programs. It's going to be really surprising, I guess, for a lot of people. If you're using SPSS, you're suddenly in an industry role. People are going to sort of say, great, you're now the statistician within the team. Can you teach us how to use Power BI? And I know there'll be a huge learning curve for you as you think, oh heck, I've never even heard of Power BI before. Now suddenly, because I'm a statistician, I'm seen as the expert in it. Oh heck, how do I get over that hurdle? But those are the big things for me: communication, learning that data preparation skills, and the software of interest in that particular sector. Back to you, Daniel.
I might make a couple of comments on a couple of things Mark said that I have a slightly different perspective on. Certainly within academia at the moment, there's a strong move to people using R and a lot fewer people using SPSS. A lot less demand for training in SPSS and a lot of demand for training in R now. There's also now within master's level programs across quite a number of universities, some training offered in statistical consulting, which tries to teach the range of soft skills that are required for working as an applied statistician just about anywhere. But of course, that's still just one subject often. And so, of course, we do need to work a bit harder than that. In some undergraduate degrees, there now are some really good science communication subjects around as well. But various people within the statistical consulting network are contributing to those statistical consulting courses. So I guess I'm not going to add a lot of new perspective to what's been said, but really my emphasis is on gaining practical experience as much as you can across a range of different disciplines if you can, or looking at different opportunities, because it's really, when we think of the application of statistics, it is across all disciplines, and we learn something from one particular application and then we can see it differently in another discipline, or we learn something different there, and that broadens our statistical knowledge. But there are a lot of interpersonal and communication skills, as the others have said. I was helping teach the statistical consulting course at Melbourne Uni recently, and we asked the students to have a look at some academic writing about what skills a consultant needed. And we asked them what surprised them. And they were surprised that they needed to learn how to write reports, that they might not have learned everything they needed to learn at university, and that they would, as Kylie said, be in this sort of constant constancy that you're developing your skills across the soft and the technical skills as you become a more experienced statistician. I think the thing I'd emphasise a little bit that's perhaps a little bit different from what's been said already, or perhaps elaborated a little bit, is there's a great skill in learning how to pursue things, how to question, how to use a popular term, dig deeper, to really understand the research context and the need of the client. So people often come to you and they're nervous because, you know, it's stats, but they also think you don't need to know all the really important things they've got to tell you. They sort of brush that aside. And unless you develop the skills for extracting that from them and making them feel comfortable about telling you that, you never really understand whether what you do for them is what they need and is what is meaningful. And I think that leaves River. Saray, have you answered this one?
I haven't gone yet.
Oh, sorry.
Similar things though. I guess the work we do, it's a lot of doing lots of analysis and then providing recommendations to other areas within the ABS. So that written and verbal communication is really important, being able to communicate the technical terms to a non-technical audience. Something I guess a little bit different from everyone else, I would say, is your coding skills. And for a lot of the work we do, you'll generally have code that you can repurpose. So someone might have done a similar analysis previously. So being able to read other people's code and repurpose it to your given outputs is, I guess, a skill that I've learnt on the job, because I guess in uni, you're really just doing your own thing and trying to get the outputs, but also being able to write your code so other people in the future can read it and make sense of it quite quickly. I guess another thing that has been touched on briefly is also like thinking about the impacts your work has on your clients, and being able to provide recommendations that are fit for purpose for them. Sometimes, you know, it might not be the perfect statistical recommendation, but that might not be what they're after. There's other things that impact their decisions, like maybe budget or how it impacts like interpretability of previous analysis done. So keeping in mind that the analysis and statistical outputs is important, but there are other aspects to decision making for clients that you need to, I guess, think about when doing analysis. And yeah, so that was all from me. So River.
Well, that was a nice segue. You can tell we both work in government, because I was thinking, oh yes, you won't always deliver a perfect statistical product. You have to develop some flexibility and a bit of a thick skin as well. So in government, one of the things that happens, we have so many checks and balances. You will explain your work about a bazillion times to at least as many people. And what they're trying to figure out is not only is it great and meeting their needs, but also are there hidden risks in there? And a really good example that often crops up over the years for me is using geography, because there are some communities which are concentrated in specific geographic areas, so you may inadvertently discriminate against First Nations people, for example, so you need to be really cautious. So that's definitely, particularly if you're looking to work in government, that flexibility and really thinking through what might be practical as opposed to what might be perfect from a methodology perspective. So we want to do robust stuff, but we want to make it work as well. The other thing that I would say, which isn't really a skill, but it does tap into what everybody's been talking about, is getting some of that practical experience. And even if you don't have time to go and do an internship, there's so many opportunities. As I mentioned, there's data challenges, there's GovHack, certainly, and you can put those on your CV. And some of those, like the data challenge I'm working on, we're thinking it's 1 to 2 hours of people's time at most, probably, because I think with smart people, it wouldn't take very long at all. But for those of us who have looked at the data 1,000 times, we're lost. And so there are those sorts of things that can tap on onto your CV as well. And that helps you decide which sector you want to work in, because Mark is right. In government, cybersecurity is such a major concern for us that we're very constrained in the tools that we have, and very behind sometimes. By the time you will become familiar with an open source tool, we're still considering whether we can safely bring it into our environment. And so we spend a lot of time bringing stuff that we've developed off network, figuring out how to get it in network, and without making sure that we bring down the system. So those would be some of the things. If you are interested in that data challenge, just hit me up and I'm very happy to give you the details, and also happy to have a chat if you'd like to talk more about working in government, because we have a lot of outreach programs to give you a flavour of it, because we know not everyone grows up wanting to be a bureaucrat.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Riva, for that. If you want, we can post on Slack as well the details of that. If you send me, I can post here for everyone. Thank you so much. And we have a few questions on Slack, a couple of questions at least. One is from Shishing. He's asking, could you comment on how easily statisticians can switch between domains and industry? What's the barriers in changing tracks during your career? Anyone? That's you.
Do you mean between different industries in Xijing?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about, is there a risk of, like, I've gone in doing business statistics and so that's it, or I'm in biostats and I'm shaped that way. It's actually going to be really hard for me to transfer to somewhere else. I thought people would be interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I'm partly the right person and partly the wrong person to answer this question, because I do work across a lot of different domains, and often someone will specialise more in a particular application, like biostatistics or some particular health application. But I think, you know, one of the challenges is when you work with a particular discipline, there's a particular language, and something that's called one thing in one discipline has a slightly different meaning or term in or different language in a different discipline. But as long as you don't get too strongly constrained by that, and you see the breadth of statistical application, and you're open to learning where the differences are, I think if you have the right kind of broad thinking skills, then it shouldn't be too much of a limitation. And sometimes you can bring a perspective from one discipline into that other discipline that can be really helpful. So I'm not commenting on that in practice though, but I think in principle, you know, as statisticians, that's exactly what we should be thinking of doing, that we can work broadly. Yeah, but whether it's difficult to switch when you're focused in one area, that's harder for me to comment on.
I'm happy to comment on that, because I've sort of a jack of all trades, really. And so every time I start to feel very pigeonholed, I sort of switch. Look, in certainly when I'm on recruiting for people, it's really normal that I'm usually recruiting for something got to do with the economic sector, but I have actually worked in the work health and safety sector, which also includes, you know, a lot of scientists. And what we tend to find that we get applications from statisticians from pretty much every field of statistics you can imagine. And really all we're looking for is, as Sue said, can you transfer those skills to a new topic area, or are you so interested in the topic area that you're willing to learn the skills as well, even if you have only done you haven't actually, you might have done an undergraduate with a fair part of proportion of statistics rather than even identifying as a professional statistician. So I think when you show that flexibility, that's what will get you in the door, and it doesn't really matter. And certainly for me, look, I fell into statistics. I had a stats degree that I chose not to use. I was actually working as an economist, and somehow or other ended up at the ABS in this incredibly technical stats role. And you will find that everybody around you will try and support you as well if you're really open with some of the challenges.
That's awesome. Anyone else want to add to that one? Otherwise, we have another question.
I'll just say.
Hi there. Can you all hear me? I was just wondering, are these questions, are they only for people on the panel or like just regular people attending as well? I'm just attending the conference. Are we allowed to answer as well?
Yeah, I think you can contribute if you want, and you can contribute in the Slack as well.
Oh, well, it was just interesting this question came up because I think I have a similar experience. I actually went to school to do my master's in analytics, which was basically applied statistics, very general. And I didn't think where I would end up. And it was just crazy how where I ended up. My first job outside was in a small consulting company with using demographics and demographics and regression techniques. Really, I did that for 2.5 years, and also using spatial analysis. And I've had to learn spatial statistics, which I had never done before as well. And there was definitely some new terminology, everything coming about it. And now in my current role as well, there's more spatial analysis involved, spatial statistics software as well, which I had never used. But having that background in statistics, more generalized, definitely helped me just kind of understand the basics of it and just how to build up from there. And I'm currently following my PhD actually, and it's a doctor of health science technically, and in more public health sphere using accident counts, and where I'm definitely using more, I would have to say, more regression techniques that are probably more applicable in the health space. And I wasn't the most adept at that back in my studies as well, but just having that background using the softwares as well, it just kind of helped me forward. So I'm doing my PhD and doing my work. I'm actually in basically separate fields, but still being able to kind of understand and bridge that gap of understanding. So I think what to understand is that if you have a general understanding of statistics and how the language would work, when you move into something like biostats, definitely I would say biostats is a special field where there's lots of new terminology and where you would need some specialized knowledge. But just having that basic understanding definitely can definitely help you kind of take it forward right there. So speaking from experience, really.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your input. The other question that is in the Slack is from Hatin. I hope I pronounced your name correct, Hatin. Any advice or tips for picking up new skills? I find regularly I am quickly outpaced by rate of technological and statistical innovation. Anyone from the panel?
I think in my experience, there is a lot of statistical innovation that happens. Having said that, as a practicing statistician, there's, I guess, the core set of techniques that you tend to use a lot, and then most of the techniques that you use frequently beyond that are still tried and true techniques. I don't want to paint us all as dinosaurs inadvertently. We do certainly use new and cutting edge techniques, but I certainly don't feel the pressure as a practicing applied statistician to keep on top of every single new technique which is published. I think that it's when I have a problem of an analysis that my existing technique doesn't do well, then I might investigate the newest techniques for how to better deal with that statistical problem and then try to apply those. And somebody else can take over.
So I would say that for me, that is both the challenge and also the fun of being in stats. So I think that, I don't know, for me, when I was sort of growing up, whatever field I was in at that time, I was thinking, great, once I do my undergraduate, I will then know everything about this field and I won't have to learn anything ever again in my life. And I think that the fun of stats is that the methodologies are constantly being developed. Who would have known 20 years ago? I mean, what is it? Terms like the data scientist, these terms didn't even exist 20 years ago. Now suddenly everybody wants to be a data scientist. And I would guess that this is software also be in that same position. So it'll be both challenging and also fun. For me, so that's one part of it. So and I think that any reasonable workplace would actually recognize that's actually not only recognize that that's one of the challenges which employees will have, but actually when they recruit people, actually to say part of the fun of the job is you get to learn new methodologies. People in stats have a thirst for wanting to learn new things. So I think that's, for an HR person, that'd be one of the exciting things of advertising position. The other thing which I was to say, and I need to stress as I do this, I have a conflict of interest that my company is a partner of Microsoft, so I need to stress that conflict of interest. But for example, we put there in the link an example of certifications. That is not to say that Microsoft is the only company that does certifications, but you want to develop new skills. You want to be able to demonstrate this to somebody else. And again, I'm looking at particularly the IT space. Things like the Power BI. Then Microsoft, whether it's Microsoft, IBM, whatever, all the companies will have certifications. If you're applying for a job and they say they're looking for particular skills in particular software packages, you want to be able to demonstrate these. Having that certification is a clear way of being able to demonstrate that for me.
Very good. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can add a quick thing from that because, yeah, I suffer from that as well. And sometimes there's a lot of, I guess, statistical innovations and packages and techniques that are coming. But I think part of our profession is to also discern on what's going to be useful for our line of work as well, because a lot of things we have to remember are also research based, and they're showing new techniques that could possibly be used in the real world, but it may not. It could just be from a statistics from a pure perspective rather than an applied perspective. So if for example, I think there's a lot of innovation happening in decision tree and tree-based methodologies on how to optimize better to reduce error and such, but a lot of them, they might not be able to be implemented in a real world sense yet in statistical packages or statistical programs. So I guess it would be tough in that sense on how to actually apply what's learned. So I think, again, part of the profession is also discerning what's useful in our field of work, because if statistics is applicable in so many fields, then we need to be able to filter what is useful for the individual. Because if I'm dealing with health and spatial statistics, there may be other areas of statistics that are inapplicable to me, and I don't think, at least from a career perspective, it would help, but definitely from an upskilling perspective and different and maybe learning something new, it would be useful. So I think that's probably an important distinction to be made as well. So that, because if we overwhelm ourselves trying to think of every new innovation that comes, we're not going to get anywhere really. So I guess that's something that's something we need to learn as we go on, I guess.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a really good point. I tend to keep myself up to date in the newest advances in a specific area of relevance to me. I think that's one way to manage it healthily. It's just too big otherwise.
Yeah, it's impossible.
The only other thing I would add is use conferences like this to make connections. I can't tell you how many people I bang up that I've met over the years and just say, oh, I'm just really struggling, or I've heard about this technique. Can you quickly tell me this is what we want to do? Is this something you can do? And so these sorts of conferences, you can make those connections that will stick with you for life and share those ideas. So this is actually a really great opportunity for you as well.
And another ad for the Statistical Consulting Network monthly meetings, where you can also post questions and get direction, you know, get a bit of guidance on where to look for solutions for a particular problem.
Yes, there's a very supportive infrastructure, I think, in the Stat Society, yeah, with the networks and the sections and all that to support you up your skills and give you opportunity for networking experience. So I think we're a bit over time, but I was, if anyone of the panel wants to say some last words, otherwise we just thank you all for your contributions, very enriching. Mark?
Yeah. So I actually do want to say one thing, and that's so old people like myself. So it's, I think that sometimes there's this thought of the older people are the people actually have all the answers. And I think that as an older person, it's fantastic spending my time around, whether we're called young statisticians or early career statisticians or whatever the terminology is now, but it's fantastic speaking to people who are young, who have energy, who have enthusiasm. And I think sort of following on from our previous questions, that's one of the things which I also particularly look for in people that I recruit. Do they have that energy, that enthusiasm? They might not have all the answers or the skills right now. So again, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. And again, it's fantastic to be speaking with people. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all for being part of this panel. I was very glad and thankful that we had such a great panel. And thank you so much for sharing your experience with us and for giving all these opportunities as well, so we can upskill ourselves and learn more and improve in our career. Thank you so much for sharing. So join me thanking our panel, and yes, anyone else going to say?